This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
A top U.S. health official says the government was slow to respond to the spread of the coronavirus from Europe. South Africa seeks over $5 billion from multilateral lenders to battle the COVID-19 pandemic. And in our continuing series on COVID-19 in Africa, we focus on lockdowns and their effect on children. Welcome to Africa Live here on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Here's what else is coming up. South Africa eases lockdown restrictions as the country tries to rescue its battered economy. And South African rugby aims to overcome future challenges as COVID-19 continues to hit the sports calendar. Well, we begin with the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The official Korean Central News Agency reports that Kim Jong-un, the top leader of the country, has made his first public appearance since speculation about his health began last month. He reportedly attended a ribbon-cutting ceremony at a factory in Suncheon, near the capital, Pyongyang. Kim was later joined by his sister Kim Yo-jung, as well as other senior officials. This was the top leader's first public appearance in state media in 3 weeks. Well, let's now get you the latest figures on COVID-19. Confirmed global cases have passed 3.3 million with 238,000 deaths. A third of the world's cases are in the United States, totaling 1.1 million. Nearly half of the world's cases are in Europe. Spain has recorded the most infections in Europe with more than 215,000 cases. Italy has seen the most deaths in Europe, nearly 28,000, second to the United States. The UK saw 6,000 new infections in the past 24 hours. It has Europe's second highest death toll. Turkey has also seen infections top 122,000. The Chinese mainland has confirmed one new case, someone returning from abroad. Well, U.S. authorities have granted emergency authorization for the use of the antiviral drug remdesivir to treat the coronavirus. The drug's manufacturer, American biopharmaceutical company Gilead Science, said it had helped patients with COVID-19 and provided data suggesting it worked better when taken early in the course of an infection. Data releases this week from a trial by the National Institutes of Health in the United States showed that the drug reduced hospitalization stays by 31% compared to a placebo treatment, but did not significantly improve survival. The World Health Organization has defended its response to the COVID-19 pandemic, saying the world had enough time to intervene. It declared the disease a public health emergency on the 30th of January. Director General Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus says it was the right time for the rest of the world to respond. At that time, there were only 82 cases of COVID-19 outside of China. The Global Health Agency has been responding to criticism of its handling of the pandemic. The United States President Donald Trump has repeatedly accused the WHO of misleading the world. But some critics say the U.S.'s inability to control the virus was due to a delayed response by Trump.
The world had enough time to intervene. And I can say it again, me and my colleagues believe that, and the emergency committee, this public health emergency, the global emergency on January 30, was actually declared in a timely fashion that allows enough time for the rest of the world to respond. To declare global emergency in that situation, I think it says it all. It says it all. And anything between 22 and 30th January was to collect information.
We remain deeply concerned about the impact that this disease will have in communities who are already greatly underserved, have many underlying conditions, and it's a real concern for the humanitarian community. We have listened again and again to numerous scientists who've looked at the sequences, looked at this virus, and we are assured that this virus is natural in origin, and what is important is that we establish what that natural host for this virus is. And the primary purpose of doing that is to ensure that we understand the virus more.
Now, the number 2 official at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Dr. Anne Schuchat, says the government was slow to understand the threat of the coronavirus spreading from Europe. The official also said limited testing and delayed travel alerts for areas outside of China contributed to the spike in cases in late February. The U.S. has become the hardest hit country with about a third of the world's total reported cases and more than a quarter of deaths. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer has expressed alarm over an anti-lockdown protest at the state's legislature. Hundreds of demonstrators, some of them armed, were objecting to the governor's request to extend emergency powers. A number of them entered the building and demanded to be let onto the House floor.
Scene at the Capitol was disturbing, to be quite honest. Swastikas and Confederate flags, nooses, and automatic rifles do not represent who we are as Michiganders. And it is important that we do the next right thing. And it's going to be driven by the data, and it's going to be driven by medical experts, not political polls, not political posturing, and not political maneuvers like you saw yesterday at the Capitol.
But President Donald Trump has sided with the protesters, calling them very good people. He called on Whitmer to negotiate with the demonstrators. The state's Republican-controlled legislature voted against extending the emergency declaration. It also voted to launch a legal challenge against the governor, who is a Democrat. But Whitmer went ahead with declaring a new 28-day emergency. Michigan is one of the hardest hit states in the United States, reporting over 42,000 cases. That's as of Friday. Now, adults in Spain are allowed out for exercise for the first time in 7 weeks as the government continues to ease coronavirus restrictions there. People around the country emerged from their homes early on Saturday to enjoy different outdoor activities. On Tuesday, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez announced a 4-phase plan to return the country to what he termed the new normal by the end of next month. To avoid overcrowding, the government has implemented a shift system, allocating different time slots to different age groups. Hit by one of the world's worst COVID-19 outbreaks, Spain imposed a strict lockdown in March, confining most of the population to their homes for all but essential trips. Moving over to South Africa, the country's school calendar has been adjusted to try and salvage the academic year. Students in their final year of primary or secondary school will likely return to classrooms on the 1st of June. Educators there are expected back at work on Monday, giving them a month to prepare for resumption of classes. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
Teachers, parents and learners have been waiting with bated breath for the final details of how the doors of learning will once again be opened. Schools have been closed since late March here in South Africa, when government introduced a nationwide lockdown to slow the pace of COVID-19 infections. Now, a central consideration, according to the Education Ministry, is that schools do not contribute to the spread of the coronavirus, while ensuring that the academic year is saved. The Education Ministry is proposing that only some schools reopen on the 1st of June, but that adherence to the laws is an absolute must. The ministry also wants to ensure that it consults with all the stakeholders in the education industry.
Each province, district and school, we've agreed that they must have practical and comprehensive plans And the plans must always talk to risk profiles in the areas in which schools are located, because different areas have got different risk profiles. Uppermost in our planning is the health and safety of school communities. As I say, particularly our learners, our teachers, and the general staff working in schools.
The reopening will take place under strict conditions, including a limit of no more than 2 students per desk, and that children wear face masks during school days.
Classes will be sanitized every day before classes start. Learners' hands will be sanitized when they enter classroom. There will be limitations of movements between learners. There will be no clustering of desks. There are also guidelines around transport.
The proposed changes to the 2020 academic calendar still needs to be approved by Cabinet. Meanwhile, Higher Education Minister Blade Nzimande says the suspension of campus-based activities at tertiary institutions will continue. However, online classes are expected to remain.
As a result of highly uncertain and fluid social context imposed by the viral threat on every aspect of South African society, it is not possible to determine with any measure of certainty the dates when physical return to campuses for the majority of our students will be possible. Until we reach that point, every effort is now being made to put in place multiple and flexible methods of teaching and learning to support all our institutions and all our students.
Minister Nzimande says the only exception will be a controlled return of mainly medical students who will return under strict conditions. To ensure that everyone is familiar with the new guidelines, the Education Department will establish orientation and training programs for pupils, teachers, and other support staff in the sector. Yolisa Njambela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. Here's what's coming up on the program. In our continuing series on COVID-19 in Africa, we focus on lockdowns and their effects on children.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference. Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Now, in our continuing series on how the outbreak has affected different segments of African society, we're focusing today on the COVID-19 lockdowns and their effects on children. Well, let's begin in Nigeria, where the partial lockdown has been extended by another 2 weeks. Schools remain shut and life has changed dramatically for many children. From helping with chores to picking up business skills, CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam brings us the experience of one Nigerian schoolboy.
This has become part of 11-year-old Anichekube Ugu's routine, chopping up vegetables for sale at his mother's store amid a coronavirus lockdown in the Nigerian capital, Abuja.
Since school closed, I have not been going to school. I have been staying with my mother in the shop, helping her in cutting ugu. And when customers is too much, I also serve one person. Then my mother will be serving one person, and the customer will be requesting for so many things. Morning, I will sweep the shop, then I'll open the shop, then I can pack all our marketing activities out. And when customer come, I can also leave I will leave what I'm doing and attend to customer sharp. Then I'll go back in packing.
Unlike some of his peers who are learning online, for Anichekube this is not an option. Helping to put food on the table in this difficult time is a priority.
And at times I'll ask them to come and help me out in the shop, so that it's not only book and the television they can be watching during this time, so that when they grow up, they can be able to manage business with their work.
Even before the coronavirus pandemic, the UN reported that 13 million children were out of school. Most of them are in northern Nigeria, where the militant group Boko Haram has been waging a campaign against Western education. Anichekube is one of the lucky ones. His parents have been able to send him to school. But even though Anichekube's mother's business is categorized under essential commodities, it's become increasingly difficult to make ends meet during the lockdown.
Essential commodities. Now, when we get there to buy things, police will not allow us to buy things. They will throw tear gas on us, asking us to go. At times, they will seize our goods, the things we buy. And after purchasing those goods, vehicle to lodge them down here, you will not even see vehicle. Even the one you will see, the price they will fix on will be much. In fact, as if say they're collecting the whole gain you made for that day.
For Anichekube, it's an opportunity to learn some business skills.
I've learned how to cut ugu. I've learned how to talk to customers very nice. Then I've learned how to do so many things. I've learned how to count money. I've learned how to collect money from customers. I've learned how to calculate money.
Abuja has been on lockdown since March, but for Anichekube and others like him, they're adapting to what could be a new normal. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Well, as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to spread across the globe, families confined together are now coming to terms with the short and long-term impact of the virus. Children are also facing a new normal, that of confinement, isolation, and the constant reinforcement of good hygiene habits. So how should children be helped to cope during this period? Well, Kista Nyabwa has more on that subject.
It's 11 o'clock on a Wednesday morning and the Mwenjes are enjoying a football game at home in a suburb in Nairobi. Since Kenya reported its first case of COVID-19, they, like other families across the city, have resolved to stay home in a bid to help curb the spread of the virus. Their days follow a loose pattern. Mom and dad tackle work, while the children do their schoolwork.
It is not a very fun thing to stay home. It's harder to concentrate when at home there are so many things to distract you.
This is a new normal as the future stretches out uncertainly. After schools and a section of workplaces shut down and the government introduced a dawn-to-dusk curfew, the Mwenjes had to sit their children down to discuss what was going on.
The other day we watched a movie called Contagion, and it's more or less the same like what is happening today. And watching that movie was much more able to explain what is happening in our country now, because it explains why we are home, why we do not have to go and meet people out there.
I've heard that it is highly contagious and that you should avoid going to crowded places. You should wash your hands regularly and also do not touch around your faces when you know you have not sanitized or washed your hands with soap and water.
This is an approach that Paul Ngunyi, a psychologist, encourages. Tension and anxiety, he says, are only natural during such unusual circumstances.
When you're enclosed in one place, that's when you really get these thoughts. What next? Is my salary going to be affected? What happens to the kids if this thing extends? We have a class 8 kid who is actually supposed to be sitting her exams.
Once our bodies are strained, our emotions are strained, our social life is strained, then it affects us psychologically, and we are likely to. This is likely to culminate to pressure and stress that can quite disorient us psychologically, and therefore there is need to learn how to cope for the various people.
Providing children with timely, age-appropriate information is then reassuring, but it is only one in a raft of measures that he proposes to help children cope. Parents are advised to draw up a schedule that children can follow to create a sense of normalcy, and games and sports provide an outlet for the pent-up energy and tension. Parents should also strive to create a safe space where children can share their hopes and fears.
This is time that people really need to be patient with one another. This is a time that parents need to be a lot of things. One is being a manager of the home and manager of movement and activity and whatever else is happening at home. They also need to be teachers to guide the children so that children are also reading, but also not over-reading, because some could also be tempted to spend too much time on the book. They don't do any physical activity.
And all this while providing their children's basic needs, a tall order as the economic situation worsens and millions across the world lose their jobs. As the world searches for a cure, it is such measures, together with constant reassurance, that could help children and the family unit as a whole to weather the storm.
How we are coping with that is just to just know that we are not alone in this. There are other people in this. And so if we go through this phase, life will still come back to normal. We'll be able to do, nothing lasts forever.
As Kenya grapples with COVID-19, this is the new normal across homes in Kenya. Families staying together and holding each other close as they wait for the crisis to end. Wilkis Anyabo, CGTN in Nairobi, Kenya.
Now, years of war have taken a toll on South Sudan's education system, and now with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the sector has been hit even harder. And like in other parts of the world, parents have begun homeschooling their children. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports.
An improvised classroom. It allows children in this home to continue learning despite coronavirus lockdown measures. The children are trying to adapt to the new environment.
Staying home because of coronavirus. I miss my friends, I miss my teacher, I miss everyone from school. We are staying at home because of coronavirus. Because of coronavirus, I like lying at home.
Their teacher is their elder sister. One of the lessons today is COVID-19.
Wash your hands with soap for 30 seconds. Avoid greeting people. And you sit far away, like for 2 meters.
After years of war and instability, according to the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, South Sudan has one of the highest illiteracy rates. The hope is that young people acquire as much education as they can during the outbreak. This is a new challenge for learners and parents who had actually given the responsibility of formal education to teachers in schools. But the home is not always a suitable learning environment.
The challenges that they are facing at home, mostly they like playing, and sometimes they can feel like should go and play inside, cartoon watching, and the brothers come disturb them when they are learning.
For now, though, these children and many others will have to get used to such environment. At least and until the pandemic is over. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Let's turn to Uganda now, where one of the challenges parents are facing during the lockdown is ensuring that children maintain social distancing to avoid contracting COVID-19. But that is easier said than done as children try to mingle with their peers. More than 10 children have tested positive for the coronavirus in the country, raising the question, how can they be better protected? CGTN's Leon Senyange sought some answers.
Keeping up with daily life, the children in this suburb in the capital Kampala go about their chores, almost all not heeding to the coronavirus prevention measures.
Here it is very difficult to manage the children because they move here and there. So when you try to talk to them, yeah, they say that maybe they are humble. Then after you feel that they have moved out again.
Last March, the Uganda government ordered the closure of all schools nationwide over the coronavirus pandemic. For many of the children, adapting to the life changes amid the crisis has been difficult. There are over 3,000 children in this suburb. The COVID-19 crisis has also taken its toll on them. With no school to attend, many spend their time outside playing, and that puts them at risk of infection. Kasasa Ayeha takes care of more than 20 children at this center. Most are orphans. They constantly talk about preventing the spread of the coronavirus.
Kids, they learn by singing and by doing their thing all the time, like this continuously. So the moment you do it continuously, it really sinks into them. And I know they are going to continue with it, whether COVID is ending or has ended. I think it's a habit which is going to stay into them now.
And medical experts advise that making children more aware about protecting themselves will keep them out of danger.
Tell a 2-year-old, 1.5-year-old, wash hands, they will understand. So you have to make the message as simple as possible for the age level of the patient, of the child, and they will understand. They will know coronavirus is dangerous. They will know that I have to keep my hands clean. Don't touch any surfaces that are not clean, that you're not sure about, and they'll do it.
Ugandan health officials say more than 10 children contracted COVID-19. While many have recovered, experts warn that they could be stigmatized.
That's a point where we have to put emphasis. How do we help these people settle back into the community? How do we protect them and yet protect the other people?
Even as many parents and guardians try their best to protect the children around them, keeping those in slums safe has proven to be a major challenge. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
And do keep it here for our next installment, where we'll be focusing on the impact of COVID-19 on the continent's entertainment industry. Well, it's almost time for the business. Here's what's coming up. South Africa eases lockdown restrictions as the country tries to rescue its battered economy. And the IMF approves a $3.4 billion emergency funding for Nigeria's pandemic response.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Well, let's begin in South Africa, where the government has started to gradually loosen one of the world's strictest COVID-19 lockdowns. Africa's most industrialized economy is allowing some industries to resume operations. That's after 5 weeks of restrictions that plunged its already struggling economy deeper into turmoil. Mining, steel production and clothing retail are among the industries permitted to reopen factories. Restaurants will also open, but only for takeaway deliveries. With over 5,600 confirmed cases and 103 fatalities, South Africa has the continent's highest COVID-19 death toll. Well, the South African Central Bank and National Treasury are partnering with members of the Banking Association to roll out an $11 million COVID-19 loan scheme. It's for businesses who are in distress because of the nationwide lockdown. Angelo Coppola has more.
It's effectively a government guarantee that allows the South African banks to continue honouring those obligations they have to depositors. The banks will almost act like a conduit for the National Treasury. There are some qualifying criteria. Businesses that were in good standing at the end of February is one, and with a track record of honouring their credit obligations, the second one. And they will then be considered for the scheme. It's aimed at businesses with an annual turnover of less than $16 million. And they must have been registered with the tax authorities as well. Companies must also be able to show financial distress as a direct result of the lockdown and an inability to generate revenue. We do understand that the loan has to be used for operating costs, salaries and rentals, but proof will be required of those expenses. The loans, of course, will be offered at a prime interest rate, which is currently at 8.75%, and repayments, interestingly, will only start 6 months after receiving that money. So there is some paperwork involved to gain access to those loans, but it will bring relief to those businesses that qualify. I'm Angelo Coppola for CG10 in Johannesburg, South Africa.
In Ghana, cases of COVID-19 continue to increase after the government eased lockdown restrictions, allowing businesses to reopen. The country has recorded more than 2,000 cases so far. The government has made wearing of face masks compulsory to contain further spread of the virus. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
Business activities are gradually picking up in the commercial hub of Accra after the government eased the COVID-19 lockdown. Edward Befi imports fabrics from China and Nigeria. He says although he can now open his shop after shutting it for weeks due to the pandemic, business is slow.
These fabrics are from the old stock we imported in December, so people are not interested in buying. We are unable to import new ones because of the border closure and flight restrictions.
Many businesses were hit hard when the government locked down parts of the country to contain the spread of the coronavirus.
People staying at home won't help anything. It won't help the situation. It's going to change to hunger virus. So with people working, maintaining the social distance, everybody is on face mask, following the directives, I think it's okay.
While the government has relaxed the lockdown, wearing face masks is now compulsory for everyone. But people are finding it difficult to practice physical distancing.
Despite easing the lockdown restrictions, Ghana's revenue generation continued to decline due to a shortfall in domestic taxes. The government says it will take 3 years for the economy to recover from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic.
The country's COVID-19 infections increased after the lockdown was eased, but the government says it's putting measures in place to contain the spread of the virus.
We will pursue vigorously our strategy of enhanced 3 T's, i.e. tracing and testing, to allow us to identify infected persons and isolating and treating them. It is the surest way to root out the virus.
But many people who have opened up their businesses after the lockdown still have fears of a further spread of the coronavirus. They want the government to strictly enforce social distancing at all public places. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
The Nigerian government has announced it'll begin easing lockdown restrictions from next week. Many businesses are gearing up to resume operations. CGTN's Deji Badmus reports on some of the precautionary measures they're considering to keep employees safe.
Many Nigerians are looking forward to the resumption of business. One of them, Johnson Chukwu. He runs an investment bank in Lagos and has not been to work since the lockdown was imposed. He says when his office reopens, its operations would be radically different.
Only senior management staff should come to the office. Only those who have their own personal offices should come to the office.
and only those who have their own personal cars can come to the office. So in that case, we reduce the possibility of infection by those who will have to enter commuter buses to come to the office. We ask them to stay at home. And then we also insisted that we're not going to have direct face-to-face meetings, that even as you sit in your office and your colleagues sit in the next office, all meetings should either be by telephone or by virtual platforms like Zoom, Cisco Webinar, and any of those platforms.
Businesses are likely to be putting in place one layer of protection or the other as they resume operation. For Adedayo Dunlana, who runs a Korea startup, he's already taking precautionary measures to ensure the safety of his staff. At the outbreak of the disease, he shut down operations and asked all his employees to self-quarantine for 14 days.
And then immediately we could confirm that we had a doctor come into the office to check us, test us, not the COVID test, I mean like the basic test to be sure that you don't have the COVID symptoms. And then immediately we got green lights on that. We decided to come back to work, and then we started rendering services again. As of today, I know there are about 9 or 10. So we've had to cut down the numbers. And remember I told you, we've been working in shifts. So that has helped us in itself manage operating costs and watch our cost effectiveness too.
COVID-19 has taken a toll on the finances of businesses, and it's also going to redefine the way many operate. And until a vaccine is found, life may never be the same again. Not for individuals, and certainly not for businesses. Dejibadmo, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Well, as countries impose necessary restrictions on social distancing to limit the spread of the coronavirus, a growing number of consumers in South Africa has turned to contactless payments for everyday purchases. According to a new survey by MasterCard, nearly 89% of South Africans have gone contactless to pay for groceries, 60% for pharmaceutical items, 39% for other retail items, 15% for fast food, and 8% for transport. MasterCard also saw a 40% jump in contactless payments, including Tap to Pay and Mobile Pay, in the first quarter of this year. The credit card giant says 80% of contactless transactions are under $25, a range that is typically dominated by cash. Now, the Algerian government plans to gradually reopen economic and commercial activity during the coronavirus pandemic. The decision to expand the list of business sectors and commercial stores aims to mitigate and limit the impact of the crisis on their owners. There have been mixed reactions to the government's decision to relax some regulations. Let's take a listen.
The reopening of markets is important to me, and I'm very happy that life has returned here. Since the start of the confinement, my family has been suffering with no income, and I was suffering financially. Today, thank God, things have started to return to normal, and despite many criticisms, I consider the decision is rational and in the best interest of those who have a very simple income.
We have been severely affected by the quarantine phase and the closure of our trade, and I have no monthly income other than this profession. Today I return to my profession, and I hope this nightmare will end soon.
I am in favor of the decision to open up the markets for certain types of trade necessary for the citizen, and not for everybody. With the distribution of medical masks, because the presence of many people in the same place in the markets and stores will bring us back to square zero, and we will have to repeat the quarantine process from the start, and this is worrying.
Well, let's turn to Beijing now, where the mandatory garbage sorting rules took effect on Friday. They require everyone to classify their domestic refuse into 4 categories and to raise their awareness of a greener environment. New methods of garbage disposal are also being promoted. CGTN's Zheng Yibin has more.
Garbage sorting is not new to people in Beijing, but a set of mandatory rules put in place on Friday will change habits in a profound way. 4 colored trash bins correspond with required categories, kitchen waste, recyclables, hazardous refuse, and residual waste. The rules are simple, but some need a bit explanation.
我今天带了点这个电池，你看应该扔在哪个回收桶里？
咱们家如果有那种纽扣电池，还有一些充电的锂电池、镍镉电池，那些属于咱们有毒有害垃圾，您可以投到咱们这个红桶里边。
应该。
Those who fail to sort trash properly may face fines up to 200 yuan. That amount could go up to 50,000 yuan for a work unit. A guideline was released earlier to advise residents to separate waste with bins and bags.
我们最主要的是呢，我们就是招募了我们的社区垃圾分类。
The most important job we're doing now is hiring more volunteers to get the information out and to teach garbage sorting skills in our communities. They really wish to share their experiences.
Good ideas and practices are promoted in many communities to let people truly understand why the rules are necessary. Kitchen waste can even be processed within the community, reducing the burden of garbage treatment.
Other garbage, hazardous or recyclable will be carried away, while kitchen waste will be used as fertilizing to grow flowers.
We use black soldier flies to turn kitchen waste into organic fertilizer to improve the soil in our community, as well as grow trees and flowers, and the flies will later be fed to tilapia fish.
And the garbage separation rules play other important roles.
This is a waste treatment plant in Beijing. The workers here say new garbage sorting measures bring them a lot of convenience.
With clearer classification, we might reduce the current processing steps from 4 to 5 to only 2. That's the biggest influence on us. Less impurities in garbage, lower cost of maintenance, as well as higher efficiencies and a smooth running operation.
Many said issuing mandatory rules is important, but the awareness for a greener environment is even more important. And Beijing is also piloting a non-waste lifestyle, together with other cities in China, calling on people to first produce less waste. That will be the top priority for environmental protection in the upcoming days. Zheng Yibing, CGTN, Beijing.
Well, thanks for staying with us. There's plenty more still to come here on Africa Live, including Nigerians shake off coronavirus lockdown boredom with group exercises.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Let's take you to Nigeria's capital city of Abuja, which has been under a COVID-19 lockdown for over a month now. Amid the restrictions, many residents have found a way to relax by hiking and exercising while still observing social distancing. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam brings us this report.
A hive of activities at the hilltops of Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Residents here take to hiking and various forms of exercises to keep fit. Authorities prohibit closed group workouts as COVID-19 cases surge, but many say they're tired of being cooped up indoors.
Okay, I registered at an aerobic class, you get. So I think last week our instructor asked us to come here to do one or two things. The idea was to socialize, actually.
But hiking is not the only activity that takes place here. Those who live around the area are also cashing in on a business opportunity here. They sell homemade drinks to thirsty hikers.
People pass in front of my house because I live around here. People pass in front of my house and they go for exercises, so they need something to drink after sweating off, and so I came up with the idea of selling natural drinks.
I positioned here strategically because the number of people that come hiking on a daily basis has increased. Okay, prior to this time, I used to sell in lower quantity, but because the attention of people has been shifted to this direction, so I produce every day in large quantity and I get to sell more.
Businesses and offices have been shut down for nearly a month. For many here, that has contributed to mental stress, and they see exercising as a way to ease off the tension. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And keeping things sporty, here's what's coming up in the sport. South African rugby aims to overcome future